Hey guys, just want to acknowledge first of all, I'm fully aware that this video is going to be really unpopular. Some people are going to hate it. However, our videos are anything and everything about Japan. This week, this story has presented itself to us, so this is what we're going to talk about. Second, just want to acknowledge too that I'm aware that some of our viewers are currently serving US military in Japan. And some other of our viewers are former US military people who served in Japan, who are honourable and decent people, as are the majority of people who are serving their country by working in Japan. Fully acknowledge that. Unfortunately, there's a small percentage of US personnel who serve in Japan who have always caused problems here, and this is what's presented itself this week. So what started this off this week was I noticed on mainstream media there was a story about the US soldiers in Okinawa patrolling with the police, that this week they'd had this joint patrolling operation between the US military and the Japanese police in Okinawa. And it mentioned that it was the first time they've done that in 50 years and they're out to ensure the safety of the community or something like that. And it was there wasn't really any explanation for it, and it was just really sus, you know, that suddenly they're doing this thing that they haven't done for 50 years apparently, since the 70s, and it raised my suspicions. I thought, why is it necessary for the US military to patrol with the Japanese police? What's going on? I suspected straight away something to do with US military personnel, because otherwise why would the US military guys be there, right? So I did some searches to find out what had triggered it. Hard to know, really. Hard to know what triggered it, because there's a whole heap of stuff. I found a whole heap of stuff. So one was that I'll read you what I found. I'll read you what I found in the order that I found it. In 2022, there was a 25-year-old soldier who was convicted of assaulting a girl under 16 years of age. Yokohama court has ordered, this was this week, Yokohama court ordered a US soldier who assaulted 4 people by body slamming them. So he body slammed 4 civilians that were walking down the street. In 2022, he body slammed them and did serious damage to them. And this week, a court awarded those victims $165,000. So that soldier has to pay those 4 victims a total of $165,000 for assaulting them. 2023, 118 criminal cases by US service people in Japan. In 2023, 118 cases. 2024, 4 sexual assault cases in Okinawa alone. Apparently too, I kept coming across the same thing. They kept repeating that apparently there was an agreement made in the 50s between the US military and the Japanese government that the Japanese government wouldn't convict or wouldn't charge American service personnel with crimes unless they were serious crimes that threatened Japan itself, right? Which is pretty much means pretty much any crime would not be pursued. And it kept getting repeated in these stories that idea or that thinking has continued on till now. So for the last 80 years, that underlying tone has continued on, that there's a hesitancy to charge or convict American service personnel with crimes, right? And that keeps getting repeated in all these stories, even though everything I just read to you, that's all convictions, right? So all those people have been convicted of those crimes. The guy that body slammed people was in jail for 2.5 years or something. This month, 2 separate cases of sexual assault in Okinawa. One service personnel was alleged to have raped a Japanese lady. I don't know what the other sexual assault was, but that's 2 this month. In Okinawa alone, in the last 50 years, there's been 6,163 criminal cases. 3,000 of them were theft, 398 of them were robbery, 134 of them were rapes, and 27 of them were murders. So that's in Okinawa alone in the last 50 years. So 134 rapes and 27 murders. I remember one wasn't so long ago. There was a American serviceman who murdered a taxi driver for some reason. Japanese taxi driver was driving him home and he murdered him for some reason. This month, and this month there was actually a protest in front of the foreign ministry in Tokyo by people protesting this stuff. And we've seen that over the years. We see that. Usually what happens is if there's some particularly heinous crime, I mean obviously it's sort of an ongoing thing every year, but if there's a particularly bad one that sort of annoys people more than usual, they'll protest. They'll protest the fact that, you know, the visitors to the country are committing crimes. So, I don't know, it's a mess. I mean, I never really got a clear idea of what had triggered those patrols this month in Okinawa. You know, first time in 50 years, what had triggered them. But when I searched, this is what I came up with, was tons of stuff. I mean, that was just the first few things that I got from searching crimes. US service personnel crimes, Japan. They're the first half dozen things that came up, and it was just pages of it. So I know over the years, you know, now and again, it'll be up in the mainstream media. Something will happen. That taxi one was a big one for some reason. It really stood out at the time, and there were a lot of protests about that as well. So, as some of you guys would be aware, there's a good percentage of the Japanese population who don't want the US military in Japan for various reasons. This is one of them. That since 1945, it's been fairly consistent every year. And again, look, we all realise that the majority of US service people are good people and that aren't doing any harm to anybody, you know. The US service people that I've been in contact with over the years who are in Japan or have been in Japan have all been decent, good people, you know, who love Japan and treat it with respect. However, there is this certain percentage who are doing this stuff, and as a result, it looks really bad for the US military, and of course, as a result of this, there are more Japanese people who don't want the US military in Japan. So I seem to remember making a video about this maybe 15 years ago, you know. Sometimes it seems like it would be better just to move all the US military to Okinawa or something, to Guam, back onto US territory. It's hard to know, you know. There's all different arguments about this. Some Japanese people say that we need the US military here because of Russia and China and everybody. Some people say it just makes us a target. So I don't know, but this definitely doesn't help. This definitely doesn't help. I don't know what the solution to it is. Maybe they have to be more careful who they allow to leave the base, you know. If this stuff's happening on such a regular basis, they obviously have to be more careful with who they let leave the base, and then anybody committing any sort of crime like this needs to be punished. Apparently there's all sorts of stories too that apparently the US military wasn't reporting a lot of these crimes to the Japanese authorities as well. When they found out about a crime and they were investigating a crime, they wouldn't necessarily tell the Japanese government. So it's a big thing. Search for yourself if you're interested in this topic. It's an amazing thing. Start doing a couple of searches and it just comes out. Loads of this stuff comes out. So yeah, it's obviously come up again this week. The idea of the joint patrols was supposed to make the community feel safer, but I suspect it won't help, because if anything, it's probably it drew my attention. As soon as I saw it, I was like, why are they doing that? Why would, for the first time in 50 years, why would the US military be patrolling with the Japanese police? I knew straight away that something must have happened to trigger it. Why would they start doing it after 50 years if it wasn't necessary? And it had to be something to do with US military, right? Personnel. Because otherwise, why would the US soldiers be there? So, and sure enough, you know, there's loads of stuff here that's been going on. So, but I suspect that that the idea of the patrol is to make people feel safer, but it's probably had the opposite effect because it's just drawn attention to all this stuff, you know. And apparently they did it 4 times from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. or something. So it's a token thing. It's obviously a PR exercise to show that they're doing something about it or something. But obviously, you know, 3 times 4 hours a night isn't going to make any difference, is it? So who knows? Who knows what the solution? We don't claim to have solutions. All we do is tell you what we're seeing, and this is what we're seeing this week. So no doubt. Usually what happens is when these things start coming up in the mainstream media, then you start seeing more and more of it, so there'll be more discussion about this for a while and it'll die down again. Same thing happened when that taxi driver was killed. People were really annoyed about that. So I don't know why they were so strong about that. I mean, 27 murders in the last 50 years, that's 1 every 2 years on average. So, but that one really pissed people off. They really didn't like that one. There were a lot of protests about that, a lot of talk about it on media for a period of time, and then it died down again. And then now and again you get a rape or something like that will happen, and it'll arc up again, and then it dies down again. So this week, don't know what triggered it. One of those things there triggered it again. It's flared up again. It'll probably die down again till the next event, to the next crime. So it's a shame. It's a shame. I feel sorry for the good US service personnel, because, you know, it must be painful for them to be tarred with the same brush, you know, just because of the actions of a small percentage of their members, you know. So it's a tragic thing. Anyway, horrible reporting on stuff like this. It really is terrible talking about stuff like this. Don't like talking about it, and most of you guys don't like hearing about it, and some people get really pissed off about it and say we shouldn't talk about it. But probably the more unpleasant a topic is, the more important it is to talk about it, probably. Because something needs to be done about that. There's some terrible statistics there. I was really surprised that I knew there'd been a couple of murders, but I didn't know there'd been 27 in 50 years. And the rapes, we hear about them all the time. Apparently there's a huge percentage don't get reported, but 134 where they're actually found guilty. So it's a terribly, way too common event, apparently, all that stuff. So anyway, that's more than enough of that. Anything and everything about Japan. More videos coming soon.